Hey, everybody, I'm Anjanette Levy, and thanks for coming and visiting my channel. Please remember to like and subscribe and hit that bell so you get notifications. I am going to talk to you all about the third week of the Sean Diddy Combs trial and what a week it was. Sean Combs, in case you haven't been following it, but I know some people have, and some people are a little bit new to the case, he faces charges of racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution in the Southern District of New York. These are federal charges, and he's pleaded not guilty to all of them. He says he has not committed any crimes. He also says, through his attorneys, that he's never sex trafficked anybody and he has never sexually assaulted anybody. This is the third week of the trial that has just wrapped up. The testimony of Mia, one of his accusers, victim number 4, will continue on Monday. I'm going to get to Mia here in just a little bit. The cross-examination apparently was pretty powerful by attorney Brian Steele, who represented Young Thug down in Atlanta. And of course, we all know what happened in Young Thug's case. He walked out of that courtroom after a months-long trial. So it was a big mess down there in Atlanta for the Fulton County District Attorney. But back to Sean Combs. The first witness of the week was a woman named Capricorn Clark. And Capricorn Clark was Sean Combs's assistant. She first met him back in 2002 and then started working for him sometime after that. She was his personal assistant. She stopped working for him after that for a little bit. Then she came back. So she had several stints working for him. And let me tell you, she told some crazy stories where I was just kind of like, we're reading the transcript and my mind is kind of like blown. She said basically on her first day of work for Sean Combs back in the early aughts that she went to Central Park with him at night. It was around 9 p.m. and she was with his security guy, Uncle Paulie. He was there with the two of them and they were walking through Central Park. And guess what? Sean Combs, he found out that Capricorn Clark had once worked for Suge Knight, his kind of arch enemy, the founder of Death Row Records. Well, he apparently said to her that if anything bad happened, he would have to kill her. This is what Capricorn Clark said. Wow. So that was the first thing that happened. She then talked about how there was another time when there was some jewelry, some really high-end jewelry that was on loan from Jacob the jeweler. Really high-end jeweler. And she was in charge of this. They were getting on a plane from Miami, and all of a sudden the jewelry is missing. So Capricorn Clark, she calls Bad Boy Records. They can't find the jewelry anywhere. She tells them to lock down the Bad Boy Records offices. And she's like, search everybody. Well, Sean Combs continues. He goes on down to Miami. And he continues on. And then she goes back to her house in Queens. And Uncle Paulie, this security guy, she says goes with her and he searches her house. Then the next day, he apparently picks her up at her house. And she said he took her to this building. And it was a building that was going to be turned into the new Bad Boy Worldwide headquarters. And she said he took her up to the 6th floor of the building. And it was an unfinished floor. And there was this guy, a big guy, like a linebacker kind of guy there. He's smoking cigarettes and chain smoking. And they were going to hook her up to a lie detector test. Can you imagine this? It sounds like something out of a movie, like a weird, crazy kind of movie. And she said he hooks her up to the lie detector, this guy and Uncle Paulie. And she's told if she doesn't pass the lie detector, she's going to get thrown in the East River. Like, can you believe it? So she's saying like she's freaking out. They can't get a good reading. The test is coming back inconclusive. And so she, is freaking out and they're telling her to calm down and she can't calm down. So she says, Capricorn Clark says, this lie detector session, these sessions go on for 5 days straight. 5 days straight, she's hooked up to this lie detector. Can you believe that? And so, she was going home at night in between, but then taken back and hooked up to the lie detector. Well, apparently they never got a good reading on it. She then went back to the office the following week. She says Sean Combs never asked her about it. She doesn't know if the jewelry was ever recovered. And that was that. Crazy, crazy stuff. So another thing that Capricorn Clark said about working for Sean Combs was that it was just really stressful, high stress, low pay. She was so stressed out. Eventually, she got alopecia, and that's when your hair basically just starts falling out of your head. So this was a high stress job. She left, but then she eventually came back and she starts working as Cassie Ventura's manager. And so there's a time where she becomes aware that Cassie Ventura, this is in 2011, is hanging out with Kid Cudi. And Kid Cudi's the rapper. And she apparently tells her, it's not a good idea. She says that Cassie Ventura wants to bring Kid Cudi on a hike with them. And she's like, don't do that. Don't text me about this on your bad boy phone because Sean Combs could see that. So she actually went to Best Buy and got a burner phone for Cassie Ventura. Well, one morning, it's December of 2011, like around December 20th, 22nd, somewhere in there. She gets a knock on her door. It's 5:30 or 6 in the morning, and it sounded like metal on metal, she said. And she opens the door. She sees through the peephole. It's Sean Combs. She opens the door and she said, Sean Combs is there with a gun. And she said, he's kind of waving it around and stuff like that. And she's like, and she said, Sean Combs said, get dressed, get dressed. We're going to go, kill this N-word. And at first he had said, why didn't you tell me? And he was talking about Cassie and Kid Cudi. But she said that Sean Combs said, get dressed. I'm going to go kill this N-word, or we're going to go kill this N-word. So basically, Capricorn Clark says she gets dressed. Sean Combs has the gun in his waistband. They get into this black Cadillac Escalade. They drive over to Kid Cudi's house. And she said that Sean Combs and one of his security guys go into Kid Cudi's house. And she actually calls, Kid Cudi and says, Sean Combs is in your house. And so he's like, what? And Kid Cudi earlier in the trial had testified that he had called Sean Combs. He had his number and he said, something like, mother effer, you're in my house. Like, what why are you in my house? Mother effer and all of this stuff. And Sean Combs was super calm. And Kid Cudi said, I'm going to be right there. I'm coming over there. And Sean Combs is like, yeah, I'm here. I'll be here. And he was super calm about it. Well, Capricorn Clark says that Kid Cudi eventually shows up. And he pulls up in his Porsche, and then, Sean Combs and the other security guy, they get in the Escalade, and there's this like wild car chase, and they're chasing Kid Cudi. Kid Cudi's Porsche takes off, and, they're going through the Hollywood Hills and all of this stuff. And then a police car shows up. Absolutely nuts. And so then she said that Sean Combs later said, you need to go get Cassie and bring her to me, but you also need to convince Kid Cudi not to involve my name in this. And so she said for a couple of hours, she and Cassie are at Kid Cudi's house talking to him about not involving Sean Combs's name because he had called the police, reported this break-in at his house. So Capricorn Clark said that she took Cassie over to Sean Combs's house as he instructed her. And Sean Combs kicked Cassie. This was in the foyer of the house, and kicked her and just continued to kick her. And that Cassie was crying and she was in like a fetal position. And that he continued to kick her and kicked her and kicked her until she was in the street. And that Sean Combs said to her, if you even try to like stop this, I'm going to F you up too. And so Capricorn Clark started leaving and started walking down, to walk home. And she could still see Sean Combs kicking Cassie Ventura at the street. And she said she called Cassie Ventura's mother, Regina Ventura. And she said, I can't help her, but you can. And Regina Ventura said that she would take care of it. So the following year, 2012, this was shortly thereafter, Capricorn Clark she's no longer working for Sean Combs. And there was like some type of settlement agreement reached. She received a settlement, and Sean Combs was supposed to give her a recommendation. And just to be clear, Capricorn Clark was fired, she said, while she was on vacation. She had a pre-approved vacation and she said she was fired. So she said she reached a settlement. And what's really disturbing is that she said that Sean Combs was supposed to give her a recommendation for a new job. And she went to go meet with Jimmy Iovine, who is the head of Interscope Records, a larger record company than Bad Boy Records, but there was a relationship there. And she said that Jimmy Iovine basically she thought they were going to go meet and talk about a job. And Jimmy Iovine, he's a big deal. He said to her that she needed to leave Puff alone, or else this wasn't going to end well for her. So she hasn't really worked in the industry since. She's worked as some type of consultant and things like that, but hasn't done much else since. Now, let me just tell you, on cross examination, Sean Combs's attorneys made some points. They pointed out that she believed, Capricorn Clark did, that Cassie Ventura and Sean Combs, that their relationship was toxic. And that's something that Sean Combs's side has been saying since the very beginning. Also, he made it sound like Capricorn Clark might have an axe to grind. She had sent him a text message in 2021, basically talking about the good day, the good old days back before she started working for him. And she had said something like, I had the biggest crush on you. I don't know if you knew that. And she was talking about how she and this other friend used to call him Chalk, which was short for chocolate. And Mark Agnifilo also pointed out that Capricorn Clark, as recently as last year, when meeting with Combs's legal team and her lawyer, brought up the possibility of coming back to work for Sean Combs, maybe as like his chief of staff or something like that. She said she thought that was the best strategy in this meeting. But they're making it sound like she's really bitter over whatever happened between all of them. And maybe, this isn't as bad as she was making it out to be. She basically said, he knows how to execute. He is tenacious. He wanted to break the glass ceiling as it related to what we were allowed to do as Black people in the business world. And it helped when you're working so hard to be working with somebody who would match wits with you on the fervor to be successful. And Clark, she became emotional and she said, this whole thing is very complicated. And she also took a couple of shots at Cassie. She made it sound like Cassie didn't want her around. So that was part of the reason she no longer was around. So that was a pretty interesting little bit that took place too. She also said that she thought that Cassie had talent and was very beautiful, but she didn't think she was like some great performer like a Mariah Carey or Whitney Houston who goes out on stage and just belts it out. But she thought like Cassie was somebody who had to be kind of coddled and needed a lot of support in the studio. Like her live performances were not that great. And she said at one point, I have good taste. So take what you will from that. Now, on redirect by the prosecution, by the government, it was interesting because they're trying to just make the point that, look, Sean Combs kidnapped Capricorn Clark during this whole Kid Cudi incident. He kidnapped her. And that's one of those predicate offenses for the racketeering charge. That if they can show that she was kidnapped and present testimony to that effect, that's one of those charges that fits into the racketeering thing. A lot of people think that this racketeering thing is overcharged. So we'll have to wait and see. That will be up to the jury. But she confirmed that Sean Combs came to her home. He had guns and he said, let's go. We're going to Kid Cudi's house. And that the whole time he was armed with a gun. So will the jury find that to be kidnapping? We'll have to wait and see. But then on recross, Mark Agnifilo really left the jury with something to think about. And it came up about Cassie. And he said, is it true that you had told Cassie at one point in time that maybe she should leave Sean Combs and date other people? And she said, yeah, that was true. And what did she say in response? And Capricorn Clark said that Cassie said, well, who else would I date? Jay-Z's already taken. So that was kind of a wow moment. Another big witness this week was Deontay Nash. He was a stylist who worked for Sean Combs from 2008 to 2018. So he saw a lot. And he is currently friends with Cassie. He's been friends with Cassie for many years. And he testified about Sean Combs controlling everything when it came to Cassie, basically her finances, what clothes she wore, her appearance, her looks. He's styling both of them and helping them both with their outfits, their wardrobes. And he saw a lot of physical abuse, he says, of Cassie at the hands of Sean Combs. And one incident that really stood out was when Cassie apparently would not answer her phone or was not answering her phone at her apartment. She was packing for London for a big trip. And Deontay Nash was at the apartment with Cassie, helping her pack, along with Mia, victim number 4, who we'll get to in just a few minutes. And he said that Sean Combs showed up irate because she wasn't answering her phone. And he started going after Cassie. And apparently, Deontay Nash is trying to jump in and stop this attack on Cassie. And Mia tries to jump on him and stop it too. And he throws Mia against the wall and she hits the wall. And Deontay Nash is, he's a small guy and he's trying to stop this as well. And then Sean Combs threw Cassie into a wooden bed frame and it split open her head and blood was just spewing and, gushing from her head. And so Sean Combs, apparently it was like a light switch had been turned. He just, oh my God, like he goes from doing this to, oh my God, we got to call a doctor and get a plastic surgeon in here. So that was a particularly startling incident. And there was apparently another incident where Cassie tried to jump off of a balcony to escape from Sean Combs. And Nash talked a lot about bruising on Cassie and her having to disguise this and also hiding out in hotels with Cassie, hiding away from Sean Combs. Just absolutely sounds terrifying. Then we get to Mia. Mia is victim number 4 in this case, and she testified that she started working for Sean Combs around 2009 or so. And, it sounded like hell on earth. Her first day of work, she gets this personal assistant job and she works 24 hours straight. She said she looked at it as a challenge. And then there was another time she said that they were in Vegas or something and she worked 5 days straight. She was up 24 hours straight. And this part is kind of important because it goes to the forced labor part of the racketeering charge. This woman was told she was going to make $55,000 a year. Well, she was actually making $50,000 a year. Working 5 days straight, she's taking her ADHD medicine Adderall to stay up and function. And she said finally she just started, her equilibrium was off. She feels like she's underwater with her ears and she's just a hot mess and she's hysterical and she breaks out crying. And then Sean Combs tells her, go to sleep. You can go to sleep after she'd been up for so long. So this was an incredibly demanding job. And then she reveals to the jury, and from everything I've heard, she walks in and she's a blonde woman. Her face is disguised. They're not showing her face in the sketches because she's being allowed to testify under a pseudonym. She walks into court and she's like walking in like this and very meek. And I heard that the defense team was kind of rolling their eyes when she walked in, and she was very much like talking about Sean Combs, that he had physically assaulted her. He had sexually assaulted her on multiple occasions over the years. And she talked about one occasion on Sean Combs's 40th birthday. They were at the Plaza Hotel in a penthouse. And she said, this is her testimony, that she was handed 2 vodka shots by Sean Combs. And she said they hit her kind of hard and she wondered, wow, have I not had enough to eat or what? And she said he kissed her on the mouth and then put his hand up her dress. And she woke up the next morning as the sun was coming up in a chair in the living room area. And she didn't really know how she got there. So she described other instances in which she claimed that Sean Combs sexually assaulted her. And she called him Puff. So everything was Puff. She didn't call him Diddy. She called him Puff. And it seems like that's what most of his friends call him. So she said there was one time, she was in his house in California and she was sleeping on a lower bunk and she awoke to Sean Combs on top of her and he had taken down her pants and there was a sexual assault and it was a very fast event. And she said she felt like she couldn't say no. She didn't say no, but she felt like she couldn't say no. And she didn't want these encounters at all. Then there was another time Mia said she was in his closet and, he came in and he was exposed and he pushed her head down and had her perform oral sex on him. So she described, a number of times. There was another incident on a plane. She also said that she was forced to take drugs by Sean Combs. And so she was very quiet, it was very stilted when she was talking about this and very emotional. Apparently, there were people crying and things like this in the courtroom. Mia also described a time that she and Cassie, they sneaked out of a hotel in California. There was going to be a party at Prince's house and they really wanted to go, but she said they were not supposed to leave the hotel under no circumstances were they to leave this hotel. But they went to Prince's house and they went to this party. And then all of a sudden she sees Sean Combs appear with this bucket hat and they see him and they start taking off and they're running. And she said that Sean Combs caught up to Cassie and, grabbed her, and Prince's security actually intervened. So there was another instance of Sean Combs, according to her, being very controlling when it came to Cassie. Then they moved on to this time when Cassie was shooting a movie in South Africa, and Mia went to South Africa with her, and she was supposed to kind of keep tabs on Cassie. That was also part of her job, was keeping tabs on Cassie for Sean Combs. So part of her job was to do that. And apparently Cassie found out on this trip that Sean Combs was seeing victim number 3, Gina. And Gina is now missing in action. The government can't find her. So she's probably not going to be testifying for the federal government in this case. And so Cassie was upset about that. And she refused to take Sean Combs's calls. Well, Christina Coram, she was Sean Combs's chief of staff. She's been described by other witnesses as sweet and innocent. She ran Sean Combs's life. Well, so guess what happens? Christina Coram, she texts or calls Mia and says, you need to have Cassie call or you're not going to have a job. You're basically going to be fired. Well, eventually things unfold and she's no longer going to have a job. Revolt Films, she is told, is going to end. That was her job at that point in time. And she said she didn't understand why. This was around December 2016 because she thought the company was making money, but apparently it was going to shut down. So Mia said she hired a lawyer. And she said that her lawyer was trying to get $10 million for her in back wages, bonuses, things like that, that she was supposed to get. Well, Mia ends up getting $400,000 in a settlement. After the lawyers got what they got, she got $200,000. So then it's time for cross-examination. And Brian Steele, he was Young Thug's lawyer, and he does the cross-examination, and he starts pulling up social media post after social media post of Mia basically talking in a really nice way about Sean Combs, including the time when she said she was sexually assaulted by Sean Combs at the Plaza Hotel. And Mia had said, basically that, you could talk to my therapist. I might have said nice things on social media, but that's what you do on social media. You post stuff on social media that's good. You don't post a bunch of bad stuff. And she basically made it sound like there were some good times, but obviously there were a lot of bad times too. And so Brian Steele brings all these social media posts out. You said this and you said that and you did this and you did that. And so a lot of people thought it was getting pretty tedious, but I'm hearing that the jury was reacting pretty positively to Brian Steele. So the government had hoped to have Mia off the stand by the end of the day on Friday, but guess what? That's not happening. She's coming back on Monday for more cross-examination. One thing that Mia said as she was trying to explain a lot of this and her interactions with Sean Combs was the fact that she said, this was an abusive relationship. It may not have been a romantic relationship, but it was an abusive relationship work-wise. And she had her trauma brain overriding her logic brain. So there was a lot there. And she also said, she remains friends with Cassie and had talked to Cassie very recently, but did not discuss her testimony. So Philip Dubé, court-appointed counsel out in Los Angeles. You're one of my favorite people to talk to about these cases. I have to get your thoughts on this case because it has been very, very crazy this week. Capricorn Clark, the former assistant for Sean Combs, totally blew my mind. I feel like I was listening to some mini mob movie testimony. Like, it was insane. She's accused of stealing jewelry from, Sean Combs that was on loan from Jacob the jeweler. And then so Uncle Paulie takes her and hooks her up to a lie detector test with some other guy. She's taking a lie detector test for 5 days straight. I mean, like, it's insanity. And then she's says she's kidnapped to go, like, to go break into Kid Cudi's home. There's a car chase. I mean, all this crazy stuff. I just can't even believe it.
Well, this is what's happening when you're dealing with the lifestyle of the rich and famous. I'm sure that the jewels that were missing were not bijoux and baubles. We're probably talking about high-end precious gemstones here. And the last thing he wants is somebody that's in his employ that's ripping him off. It's very easy to say that, oh, I got jacked, I got robbed, they're missing. Well, isn't that convenient that somebody who makes what, maybe $125 a year in possession of millions of dollars worth of jewelry got robbed and jacked and they're missing? It's crazy. And Jeanette, some years back, I think it was right before the pandemic, we had a case at my courthouse involving an R&B star who was on a plane, landed in LA, and she claims that $400,000 worth of jewelry was missing from her overhead compartment. And they arrested a janitor who cleans up the aircraft after everybody deplanes. And they charged him with grand theft. They never, ever, ever found the jewelry on him. They found no signs of it anywhere, but they still prosecuted him, and it got dismissed at the preliminary hearing. The court found that there was just no evidence, And coincidentally, that particular R&B star had just filed for bankruptcy, And what woman would leave $500,000 worth of jewelry out of their sight in an overhead compartment? I don't care what your wealth status is. That's something you don't let go out of your sight. Anyhow, it got dismissed. What is my point? My point is, I'll give him that he really did entrust her with all that jewelry. And if she, as a personal assistant, couldn't safeguard it, I think there are a lot of questions to be answered. And if all he wanted was a polygraph test, you would think she would gladly submit.
She did, but she said it went on every day for 5 days. They took her to like this building. This is what her claim is, that Uncle Paulie took her to the security guy, took her to the building with the unfinished. It sounds like something out of a movie, with the unfinished space on the 6th floor. And she's hooked up to this thing. And they told her that if she didn't pass it, she was going to get thrown in the East River. I mean, it's pretty weird.
Well, yeah. Look, at the end of the day, do you really think that he would have done that? Do you really think she would have just been deep sixed in the Pine Barrens somewhere in Jersey?
Or were they trying to get her to fess up?
Maybe that could have been it as well. But it sounds like for 5 days straight, she did not trigger any deception on the polygraph test. So they had nothing on her. What are you going to do? Did it ever occur to anybody that she really got strong arm robbed? So it is what it is. And people probably knew that she worked for him. People probably knew that she might be carrying a wad of cash, might be carrying jewelry, and she had a bounty on her head, frankly. And maybe somebody tracked her down and stole it. It happens, That's why you have insurance. This is it right here.
So, she talks about how, she's working a lot. She eventually leaves his employment. She then comes back. Her relationship goes on with him for a really long time. She's brought back as Cassie's manager. Then she talks about she says she's kidnapped. And I'm wondering if this is really going to make it under a predicate offense with the RICO charge. Because they're accusing him of kidnapping under the RICO charge. That Combs comes over to her house, 5:36 in the morning, demands that she come with him, get in the car. He's got guns. He's got a gun while he's in her apartment. They're going to Kid Cudi's house because he's going to, we're going to go kill this guy. We're going to go kill this N-word is what she said he said, because he's furious that Kid Cudi and Cassie have been talking and dating and everything. And she's saying, she didn't say that he pointed the gun at her, but she said he was waving it around. Then it was in his waistband. It was on his lap when they were in the car. She gets in the Escalade. They go over there. She calls Kid Cudi and says, hey, he's in your house, and all this stuff. Does that qualify as a kidnapping, do you think?
Of her, it could, if she went over there against her will. All the law requires in California is that there be any movement of the victim against their will. In the old days, at common law, it literally had to be the taking of a child, typically at night. where you go in, you could crawl through a window and you take the baby away. But no, the law has been modified over the years, and it could be literally out in public. I could just yank you off the street and pull you behind a dumpster. That is a kidnap. And if the jury finds that it was a kidnap for rape, that carries life in prison. It's a big deal. But here's Diddy's legal problem. And this is where I kind of feel sorry for him, I must say. And not that I'm an apologist for him, but under the federal RICO statute, the prosecution does not have to prove each predicate offense beyond a reasonable doubt. And in fact, the jury doesn't even have to be unanimous on each predicate act. It's terrible. All they have to show is that the enterprise is used to commit the crimes. That's it.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty low bar if you think about it. Anybody could come in and take the stand and say this is what happened. And if the jury believes the testimony of one witness, they can convict.
Yeah. And that's what's interesting to me, is that they don't have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt that he did it. It's almost like they just have to bundle. It's like a bundling, they bundle it all together, and say, hey, here it is. And here's the pattern. And here you go. Deontay Nash, the stylist, I thought he was a pretty compelling witness. I mean, he detailed a lot of the abuse of Cassie, the control that, Combs had over her. He decided everything about her, the abuse, so that could go to the coercion part of the sex trafficking charge and stuff like that. How did you feel about his testimony? Because I feel like he kind of got the best of the defense attorney on cross.
I think the problem for the prosecution with his testimony is that I don't believe that anything he had to say was in any way tied to the enterprise. In other words, if all you have is just isolated sort of incidental criminal acts unrelated to the enterprise, then what you do is you get them on those isolated offenses, be it domestic violence, be it assault, be it battery, great bodily injury, but you got to get to the courthouse on time to file charges. If you don't, then those charges are time barred. And I think he testified that he worked for him, between 2008 and 2018?
Yeah,
the statute of limitations are long time barred. They're done. So what do you do if you can't get them stateside? You try to get them federally. And that's what they're doing. They're using the federal RICO statute as an end run around the state statutes of limitation. And I know there's been some rumblings in the media lately that our president might pardon him. And a lot of people say, well, why? Well, they're saying he was a big donor to his campaign. But one thing I must say, not necessarily in defense of Trump, but as to why I understand why he would do it, is that he is a big supporter of states' rights. And a lot of the things that he stands for, if you believe that he is a principled person, is to allow states to exercise their own police powers under the 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution. And if California, New York, or Florida chose not to go after him, then it's his prerogative as the head of the executive branch to not force his Department of Justice, his U.S. attorneys to pursue charges. That's his prerogative. Now, whether or not I'm overthinking this and I'm giving him the benefit of way too much doubt, that's another question. But I would think that that would be the only rationale, aside from him being a big donor to his campaign. Otherwise, I don't know why else he would do it.
Well, he said he would consider it. Nobody's asked, and he hasn't been paying attention to it or watching it, but he said he would consider it. And they were friends years ago. Combs, I don't think Combs donated to his campaign, because Combs always supported Democrats. He said when he entered politics, I saw the little snippets in the press. He said that when he entered politics, Combs kind of said some mean things about him. And you know how Trump is about that stuff. But at the same time, we've seen President Trump, go against the grain when it comes to a lot of this stuff. So, I mean, but Sean Combs isn't even convicted yet, which
doesn't matter. Actually, it does not matter.
That's true. You could preemptively pardon him if he really wanted to.
Do you know you can pardon a person pre-filing, pre-charging, and just bring everything to a screeching halt? So that means even if you're in the process of trying to impanel a grand jury, it all comes to a halt.
Mhm.
You can do it right in the middle of trial. You can do it post verdict. I mean, pretty much any time. That's how broad the pardon power is.
The other witness who's been on the stand for a couple of days, and she'll be back on the stand on Monday, is Mia, the one who's testifying under a pseudonym. She's been permitted to do that, and she was an assistant for Combs. Then she worked for Revolt Films, helped him start that up. She said. And she said, he sexually assaulted her on multiple occasions. This is not somebody who's part of the sex trafficking count. She talked, I think she fits the bill under the RICO for the forced labor, being forced to work 5 days straight, 24 hours a day, that type of thing. But on cross-examination, some people are saying that Brian Steele really went after her, and the jury was reacting positively to Brian Steele. So she's going to be back on the stand on Monday. So it's like they've got a whole weekend, Philip, to prepare to do more damage potentially to this government witness.
They're going to cross her left, right, and center 6 ways to Sunday, put her through the Vegematic. And rightfully so, because she's a pivotal witness for the federal government. Let me just tell you in the end what the test is, the legal test. The test is whether or not Sean Combs reasonably believed that she consented to all this at the time. If she reasonably consented at the time, then you cannot get him 10, 15 years later because she has now changed her mind and say, in retrospect, I should have said no. In retrospect, I really meant stop. In the middle, in the heat of things, I really meant to say no, but I didn't. Well, then what is the jury left with? To look at her assertive conduct midstream. She's going with him. She's probably plying him with the Kama Sutra, the aphrodisiacs, the sexy attire, whatever it is that she did, celebrated his birthday, did, photo ops, posted it online. I think to a reasonable sort of sexually motivated man, he might think that this person is consenting. I don't know how else you would interpret it, unless something is going on behind, been plied with drugs, and her consent is involuntary. But, the problem is the jury doesn't get to consider any of that. If they believe her, that is enough to prove that predicate. And what's really scary about federal RICO law is that the prosecution only has to show two predicates being committed during the course and scope of the enterprise over a 10-year period. It's not hard to do. So the defense is going to have to show A, that it wasn't even an offense at the time, and B, it was just an isolated non-criminal incident.
Yeah. It's interesting because apparently people were getting pretty emotional when she was testifying on Thursday, because she's talking about all of this, which sounds horrific. And then apparently Brian Steele starts cross-examining her. And in the middle of this, outside the presence of the jury, Mark Agnifilo, the lead attorney for Sean Combs, he tells the court they believe she was acting when she was saying all this stuff, which I found very interesting because that's going to be out there all weekend.
Yeah, and it wouldn't surprise me in the least. What is it? This is her one moment in time where she takes the stand, and this is her time in the limelight to tell her side of the story. I don't know to what end. For the jury to assess her credibility today versus what she may have done or said back then, I think that's going to be the test. And I think that's what an astute defense attorney does, is you bring in all the circumstances of the quote unquote crime, her behavior after the fact, on the day of the incident, and show, was this consensual or not? Again, not fast forwarding 14 years, but back then. And I think that is going to be the tall task for the defense. But it sounds like that he's doing a great job just putting her through the Vegematic.
Yeah, I'm going to be interested to see how it ends up on Monday,
Yeah.
because the government wanted her off the stand by today. They thought she'd be done by today, and the defense was like, "I don't think so." It was interesting. So, Philip Dubé, thanks so much. It's been great talking to you as always.
Have a great weekend.
Okay, so that's it for my recap of week 3 in Sean Diddy Combs's RICO trial out of New York. I hope you enjoyed it and the little bit of legal analysis with Philip. I hope to do more of these videos. So please like and subscribe and hit the bell, and I'll see you again soon.